Hi folks, Jack Spirko here with another video. I know a lot of you guys have been waiting for new permaculture videos to come out. Today's not a permaculture video, it's an economy video, and it's about QE3, or as I'm calling it, QEF. QEF to me is QE forever. And that means that our illustrious leader of the Federal Reserve, if you even want to believe he's really calling the shots, the chairman, Ben Bernanke, has come out with QEF, or QE forever. And before I can go over what I have here for you to explain to you why it will work, and notice in quotes, so if you think you're going to be angry at the end of this video because you know it damn well it's not going to work, give me a chance, because I'm not saying it's going to work permanently. I'm saying there's going to be a short-term effect, and that short-term could be anywhere from 6 months to 3 years. We really don't know. And we need to start realizing in this world of the economy and things like the Fed and printing money and all of that, that we don't know how long it's going to last. And it's amazing how many times these guys can kick the can. But what is QEF? What makes it different than what they've done before? Well, QEF, or forever, means that Ben Bernanke came out and said we will buy $40 billion worth of mortgage-backed securities from the banks every month until it works. And works will be based on their estimation that the economy is heated up to a point where you don't want to let it get any hotter. So unemployment significantly down, somewhere in the 6-7% range. The housing market moving again, all of those things that we would look at as recovery. And I think on some levels it will work. It's the disastrous consequence on the other side that's going to be the problem. Now, you have to understand why this is being done. This is not being done because it's like, gee, I think this is a new idea to do this, or I'll do it now because now seems like the right time. It's being done because the market is a spoiled brat. That's why. The market, the stock market, the housing market, the equities market, all the markets have become spoiled brats all around the world, to all the central banks going, it's broke, fix it. It's broke, fix it. So Uncle Ben came out and said, you know what, guys? Tired of hearing about it. Uncle Ben's got your back. Uncle Ben is going to do this every month. Go on, go nuts. Here's what's different. Most of the bad loans, the bad mortgages, the toxic assets that we'll get to in a second, have already been bought up by the Fed. Banks are holding very few of them, really. That's one thing to understand. That what they're buying now is your mortgage, my mortgage. The Fed's buying it and giving the banks money in return for the mortgages. So the Fed's getting relatively good, secure mortgages right now in return for money they're creating out of thin air. Remember, when the Fed buys a bond, whether it's a mortgage security, whether it's a U.S. Treasury bond, whatever, they don't take money and give it to you. They make a journal entry, which actually is how the money's printed, if you want to call it printed. They say, deposit to Bank of America $1 billion, boom, and a new $1 billion is born. So they're buying it with a journal entry. So to understand what's going on here, we're going to use two of our little friends, the markers. The green marker, I will put a check mark next to everything on this board that's being purchased or sold for money, green, right? And then the brown marker will show us everything that's being purchased or sold for a journal entry with a big brown check mark. When we look at that, we'll see the picture of what's really going on here. So people have asked me, and I did a great podcast, and the end of that podcast, I explained this whole thing more deeply than I'm going to do today. And this is to help with that podcast. So I'll put a link in today's show notes as soon as my site's back, because we got a database error right now. It might be internet-wide, I'm not sure, but I figured I might as well get something done. But I'll have a link for you guys so you can listen to that to go along with this video, or maybe I'll even do a follow-up to this. But here we go. Let's take a look at who's selling and who's buying on both sides, with the banks being on this side and the Fed being on this side of the board. So you can hear, what are the banks buying now? Well, right now, we know the banks are buying gold. We've had many reports that all the banks, the large banks and the central banks all over the world, are buying gold, and they buy gold with money. You can't buy gold with a journal entry. Got it? All right. United States Treasuries. The banks are buying a lot of U.S. government debt. That's one of the reasons they've been stuffed with money, so they will buy the U.S. Treasuries. How do the banks buy the Treasuries? Unlike the Fed, the banks actually have to take cash and convert it to a treasury. So the banks are buying the treasuries with money. The banks are also buying, on a lesser extent, specifically those short-term municipal bonds, city bonds, county bonds, and things like that. And they're being pressured to put more and more reserves into treasuries and municipal bonds because the Fed needs the money there. The Fed needs the money there. So they buy a municipal bond with cash. All right? So the bank buys these three items with cash, and it holds them. Okay? The last one, new loans. That's another way to look at when a bank loans you money, they're really buying a loan because you come to them and you say, I need $200,000, and they have to put $20,000 in reserve status to create $200,000 in new money. See, the banks print money when they make a mortgage to you as well. The bank doesn't give you $200,000. It makes a journal entry saying that you now have the ability to spend $200,000. That goes through, creates the new money. It goes to the seller. The seller puts it back in the bank and it recycles. But they buy your loan with a journal entry. Very important. When we get this whole thing done, you'll see how this all works out. So what are the banks selling right now? What are the banks trying to get rid of? One, they're getting rid of existing current loans. When I say a current loan, I mean this is a mortgage where the guy on the other end of the mortgage is paying the bill every month. But they know it's kind of a risky mortgage because the house is probably underwater. It's maybe paying a good interest rate or whatever, but they're selling the current loan. But they're selling it to the Fed, who's buying it with what? A journal entry. Okay, matured treasuries and bonds. So as the bonds and the U.S. treasuries come to term, they're holding a lot of short day paper, 90-day bonds. They're selling those and they're getting money for them. But we go back up here, what are they doing with the money when it comes to term? They're either buying gold, U.S. treasuries, so they're rolling them to new bonds, right? We can see that. And then they're selling toxic assets. Now, who the hell do you sell a toxic asset to? You'd sell it to the only person that can afford to buy a toxic asset, and that's the person buying it with a journal entry, and that's the Federal Reserve. And that's what we need to understand is, who are they buying from? Well, they're buying gold from the open market. They're buying U.S. treasuries from the federal government. They're buying municipal bonds, and some foreign bonds as well would go into these two categories with money from the open market, funneled through Goldman Sachs, by the way, so they can make their little commission. And then they're creating their new loans with a journal entry. But they're selling, everything they're selling is going over here to the Fed, right? Or it's just coming to maturity and it's being turned over. So the U.S. debt, U.S. Treasury note they have for $1 million just gets turned over to a new one at maturity because it's seen as safe as cash right now. I know it's hard to accept that, but that's how it's seen right now. Let's look at the other side. Okay, this is where it really comes together. You start to see everything. So what is the Fed buying? It's buying existing current mortgages, which are being sold over here by the banks, and we know that's being done with a journal entry. It's buying toxic assets, not as many as it was in the beginning because it bought so many that were really considered toxic, but it bought them with journal entries. It's buying U.S. bonds. This is another way the Fed can print money. You can just go to Bank of America and go, you got $100 million worth of U.S. Treasury bonds? Yeah, we'll buy those from you at market value. Journal entry, right? And then Bank of America gets $100 million cash, buys new bonds. We increase the debt and we increase the money supply at the same time because they are the same thing. All the money is debt. And the last one they're buying, the Fed is buying gold. They're buying that with cash. They have to. You can't buy gold with a journal entry no matter who you are. What is the Fed selling right now? Well, we don't really need a check mark for the first thing. The Fed is effectively selling nothing. When I say the Fed, I mean the federal government, the Federal Reserve, the private central banking cartel that runs our nation's economy. They're not selling anything except this right here. And I don't think we really need either of those color markers for it. I'll just circle it for you. They're selling us a marketing and PR campaign, telling us it's going to work. So that's what's going on. Now, why do I think this will work? Because here's what's going to happen. To understand an opponent in a competition, let's say, and this is a competition, right? You have to understand why are they doing what they're doing. So what you see the banks and the Fed doing are loading up on gold. One of the things they really have to buy for money, because even though they buy these two things with money, it really is still considered money. It's like holding cash in a different form of paper. The only two things that the banks are really interested in right now are gold. Now, what about the new loans that they buy with a journal entry? Well, check this out. You start loaning money again. You start getting it out there. You start to reheat up the housing market. And as these new loans come in, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to pause the camera. We're going to make a part two because this is going to get too long.